Every life has a story, and every story is worth sharing. Your story, my story, and our story speak of victory and defeat, joy and sorrow, resilience and vulnerability. They are not just our story, they are Christ's story in us. They are Kingdom Stories from Down Under.
You know, when you meet somebody who just really knows the Word of God, really loves the Word of God, and is able to share it and simplify it and make it clear out there, well, these kind of people are very rare. But when you run across somebody like that, when you meet someone like that, well, it's worth connecting with that person and learning a lot from that person. I was privileged in this patch of life that I have here on earth to meet Pastor Geoff Parsons, who really has a love for the Word of God, and he's able to transmit it in a very clear and simple way. And I've been privileged to take part in a lot of his teachings, and he's been sharing a lot of these in our church as well. Tonight at Kingdom Stories from Down Under, we have Pastor Geoff Parsons. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Natanael.
When you made it so clear, the teachings of Apostle Paul and Apostle Peter, both at the Australian School of Ministry and the seminars we held at the school, I just realized that you can take difficult concepts and really bring it to a place where it lands with people and people can actually assimilate and understand, because these are quite complex.
That's right.
And but you have a gift of just making it simple.
Yes. I mean, the gift of Jesus was he made very complicated things very simple to understand.
Yeah.
And that's the majesty of the gospel, but it's also the stumbling block of the gospel, because the stumbling block of the gospel is not its complexity, it's its simplicity.
Sure.
And that's what people stumble over. But
so when you meditate on the Word of God, when you study, does it make sense immediately? Do you need to ponder on it? Do you actually make an effort to clarify it, or does it flow?
It flows intermittently. So I can't sit down. I mean, it might, time-wise, to write a message, if you take all of it, I could say I could write the message maybe in 6-8 hours, which seems a lot.
Yeah.
But I can't do that continuously. So what I do, I just start, and I start with a title.
Sure.
Right, because without a title, you cannot write a message.
Okay.
And so I always choose the title very carefully.
Yes.
And as I go, I look what I've written. And if I've written something that has nothing to do with the title, then I delete it.
You change the title?
No, I have done that a couple of times.
That's what I would have done.
Well, I've changed the title because I wrote so much that wasn't on the title. I changed the title. But I think that's cheating a little bit.
Is it?
And so what I do, I just choose the title, I begin to write.
Yeah.
And soon as the inspiration goes and I begin to struggle, immediately I just stop.
Okay.
And I might stop for half an hour, I might stop for a couple of days, but I just stop.
Okay. So I used to either go on a topic, not decide the title, but look at a topic or a Bible verse or a scripture. Yeah. And then I would do the title last. Yeah. So I would do the study, maybe the points, and then come up with a title that encompasses it all. Yeah. Now the problem is, in our day and age, we are advertising in advance the message or the topic that I will be preaching on in 2 or 3 weeks. Yes. And because we're putting this on social media, even though I haven't done the notes yet or prepared the sermon, I have to give the title.
Yes.
So now I'm forced to do what you've done. Yes, right. I have to give the title, the topic, and then I got to work it out.
That's right.
So,
see, the thing I would find difficult, I can do it, but I find it more difficult if someone says, would you like to preach in 2 Sundays' time, and they give me a title.
Oh. So a title, but if they give you a topic is fine, not to give you a title.
Even a topic, I would.
Okay.
I would struggle.
Yeah.
Because to me, the title is everything.
Yeah.
The title is everything.
It's that's a kernel for you.
That's right. It's a sum of everything.
Yeah.
That contains in the sermon.
Yeah, beautiful. How long have you been preaching for?
40 years.
40 years.
Yes.
That's a lifetime for some.
And you learn, of course, when you start. It's very.
So what did you do before you were preaching?
I was always in the ceramic industry.
In the ceramic industry.
Yeah,
so hang on, let's go back. Where did it all start for you? In England somewhere?
Yeah, I was born in the latter years of the Second World War.
Mm-hmm. Baby boomer or just before baby boomer?
Way before that.
Way before
1942.
Okay.
Although I can't remember anything of the Second World War, as far as bombing goes,
Yes.
anything like that. What I do remember very clearly was food shortages.
Okay.
That
by then, your first memories of 4 or 5?
4 to 5, and food shortages in England went way after the declaration of peace, and even 7, 8 years after the war, there was still food shortages in England.
Mm-hmm. What town or what city were you in?
Stoke-on-Trent, which is a pottery town.
Yes.
In England then, of course, England then was the manufacturing capital of the world virtually.
Yeah.
And every town specialised in one industry. So
Okay.
Stoke-on-Trent was ceramics, Sheffield was stainless steel cutlery, Manchester was cotton.
Yeah.
And so the only trouble with that, of course, once that industry got into trouble, the city itself
Died.
Yes.
So why is it called ceramics and not China?
Well, the clay we used, we actually call it kaolin.
Okay.
And kaolin was the original place where they found clay in China, in kaolin in China.
Okay.
Right.
So your clay was brought from China or was it local clay?
The clay came from Cornwall in the south of England.
Okay.
But the manufacturing was in Stoke because Stoke had the coal.
Okay.
And so,
To burn.
in those days, it was all bottle kilns and coal-fired.
Yeah. And you were making both plates and pottery, everything?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the town, so was that a natural trade that most people would follow?
Well, I mean, in those days when I first started, and that would be 15, in the early 50s, there was something like 350,000 people in the ceramic industry in Stoke.
Whoa.
And so virtually you'd walk down a street and there would be 1, 2, 3 factories on every street.
Yes.
Because we sent
so
ceramics
both
to
small
and
large.
small and big, yes.
Yeah,
Small and big.
Okay. And how was family life? How many siblings?
An older sister and an older brother who were a lot older than me. I think I was 14, 15 years younger than my brother, more than my sister. And that was a problem because there was a massive gap between me and the other children.
So were they like really into your life or really separated?
Oh, the big thing that affected my childhood was 2 things. First of all, when I was 7, my mother died.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And within, I think, 8 months of my mother dying, I caught TB. Tuberculosis. So I had to go into a hospital, and I was in the hospital about 7 months recovering.
On your own?
Yeah.
And without mum?
Yeah. And we only had 1 visitor every week.
Ouch. And who would that be?
Well, one day my dad came, and the next week my brother and sister came.
Mm-hmm.
So things were very different there.
Harsh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you'd be obviously in a place with many kids in the same room or many people.
In the same room, yeah. And then even that, as Carol will tell you, my wife will tell you, because one of the cures, I mean, penicillin had just been invented in the Second World, so penicillin was part of the cure. But the biggest cure was just fresh air and rest.
Yeah,
and so in the sanitarium where I was, even in the middle of winter, every window was wide open all the time.
Yeah.
And you slept and slept and slept. And so even now, I sleep an awful lot.
And with the window open.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's refreshing.
That's right. Yes.
So, what was your mum sick?
She had. Well, in those days, she just had a leaking heart valve.
Yes.
Today, it's just a minor operation. Those,
there was nothing back then.
It was just a death sentence.
Yeah.
And the problem was, my father was a miner. All my relations were coal miners, and so he was going to work at 5 o'clock in the morning. So I had to get myself up from school. Didn't have a proper breakfast because piece of bread and jam. Yeah. Came home, My
Again,
dad had
on your own?
On your own. And so over a period of time, I think I just became very worn down, and that's why I got the TB.
What were you doing after school? Playing soccer, football?
You just lived outside, you know.
Yeah.
Lived outside, you know. You just went out and you never came back until it was dark, basically. But those were different days.
Of
different
course.
days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your teenage years?
I think it was I was a very ordinary teenager, you know. I mean, I was involved in it. My father was a lay preacher for 50 years.
Oh, okay.
So
you had a Christian heritage?
A Christian, yes. My mother wasn't a Christian at all.
Yeah.
That's what I've been told, anyway.
Yeah.
My mother was not a Christian at all. In fact, her family were all big drinkers.
Okay.
And I can remember that.
Yeah.
And so my father was a lay preacher.
Mm-hmm.
So even after my mother died, I can remember, you know, he would go and preach at some little village church.
Yes.
And he would take me with him, you know.
Oh.
And it might have taken us an hour and a half to get there because we had to go by bus.
Okay.
And of course, you'd get there and there'd be an organist.
Yes.
And one person in the congregation.
Oh.
And that would be it.
Yeah. But he loved obviously the Lord.
Yes, and he had a gift for preaching.
And in the local town, I mean in Stoke,
Yeah.
where you were, did you go to church on a regular basis?
I went to Sunday school.
Yeah.
But I think when I came to my teenage years, in fact, I was a Sunday school teacher at quite an early age.
Oh.
You know, but I ran away, not ran away, but I walked
enough.
away.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but
Yeah.
But even when I didn't go to church,
Yes.
I knew there was a God and I believed in Jesus, but didn't really affect my life in any way.
Yeah. So at about 15, you went as an apprentice?
Yep, I went into I went into management, and I went to 7 years at college.
Okay.
3 nights a week.
Yes, part-time.
So, part-time. So I worked all day,
Yeah.
and then 3 nights a week I went to college to
Yeah.
learn ceramics.
Okay. And then obviously you were working in the same factory all those 7 years?
Different. I had about 3 different factories, but I didn't change jobs.
Okay.
All that often.
Booze, girls, fights?
I preferred girls to boys. I was always a girls' man.
No, booze in the sense drinking.
No, I didn't drink. I didn't like beer.
No, okay.
No,
Because that was common. Obviously,
Yes.
the boys were drinking a lot.
Most of my friends used to go into pubs and drinking beer,
Yeah.
and I would just say, "Give me a taste,"
Yeah.
and I could say, "I don't know, I just didn't like the taste of beer." That
Yeah.
was early on. Later on, I
Developed a taste.
developed a taste, but not in my early years. No.
Yeah. So girls, when did you marry? Did you find someone?
Yes, I got married at 20. My first wife,
Yeah.
and it did not work out, unfortunately.
So she was from town?
She was from
A local girl?
Yeah.
Did you get married in a church or?
No, register office.
Okay.
Register office.
And the early years, no connection with God?
No connection with God. And then we emigrated to Australia in about 64, I think, or 62.
Children?
Yeah, we had one girl there.
Yeah.
And we had another boy over there.
Okay.
And so, but then she got homesick and we came back, and eventually the marriage disintegrated, which was that was a very, I was then in my late 20s,
Yeah.
early 30s, and that was a very difficult time for me.
It would have been.
Yeah.
And the children, they remained in England?
They remained in England, but there's the boy, my son, is now in Australia with us.
Oh, nice.
And
So what did it mean to you, the marriage breakdown?
it was just terrible because I didn't know. She was committing adultery, and I didn't know. When I found out, the shock was just, terrible, because everyone knew what she was doing except me, and so it really was a terrible betrayal to me. Yes, a terrible betrayal to me.
How did you recover?
Just time, I think. Just time, And
What were you telling yourself?
I don't really know. I mean, the hardest part was, people used to say, well, just go out. But, if you went out, for a drink in a pub, everybody's got someone to talk to.
Yeah.
And you go alone. And there's nothing worse than being alone in a place where everybody's got someone to talk to.
Yeah.
So I didn't go out, because going out alone, I just felt was worse than staying in, yes.
Yeah. So you came back to Australia?
Came back to England from Australia.
Okay.
And that's where I met my wife now, Carol, of 40 odd years.
Yeah.
And she changed my life.
Okay. So how old were you by then? 30 or?
30, I thought it was about 31 when I first met her.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And had she been married before?
She'd been married before and gone through exactly the same.
Oh, so she understood you?
Yeah.
Wow.
So she didn't trust men, and I had to work very hard to get her trust.
Okay. Was she a believer?
Yes, she was a Christian, yes, all the time.
And where were you at that stage?
I wasn't just a non-believer.
Yeah.
So I would have been going to Sunday school when I was probably 14.
Yeah.
And so 14 to 32, no relationship with church or Jesus at all.
And then you came to Australia, both of you?
In the end, we did, after we were married, yes.
Was that a choice you made, or?
It was, I think God was in it, because I was just reading the local paper one night in the house.
Yes.
And I happened to say to Carol, of course then there was a lot of adverts for jobs from the ceramic industry. Yeah. And I used to know some agents who hired people. And I just said to Carol, there's somebody, the advertising a job in Perth, you know.
Bristol Clay House.
That's where I used to work. And the
Australian Fine China?
Yeah,
or
Australian Fine China.
In Subi?
Yeah. And they said, you know, somebody's coming over in wherever it was in June or July to do the advertising.
Yeah.
And Carol said, "Are you interested?" I said, No. I said, "What I'll do, I'll ring up though, because the guy that's coming over, I might know him, and so we could go out for, you know, reminisce." So I rang up and they gave me the guy's name, and I didn't know him, so I just forgot all about it.
Yeah.
But then, I suppose 6 weeks later, there was a phone call when I was at work.
Yes.
And the guy said from the agency, you know, "We've got somebody coming over to be interviewed for this job, but he's coming from Ireland, and his plane has been delayed by fog." And I've said, "I've spoken to this man who's come over and said, I know you very well.
Yeah.
And you might be interested in going."
Yeah.
He said, "Can you come over now to be interviewed?" So I went there. By this time I had my own pottery company, only small. But, so I was covered in clay, covered in dust. I went into
perfect.
Perfect way to make an impression.
Of course.
And so we spoke for a bit, in about an hour and a half. And when it came to the end, when this guy had suddenly arrived from Ireland, you know, the managing director of Bristol Clay said, "Well, are you interested in having this job?"
To you?
Yeah. And I just said, yes. And that was it. And we shook hands and we walked out.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I said to Carol, and she said, "You didn't say that, did you?" About, I suppose, 4 weeks later, we heard nothing. So I just said, 4 weeks later, there's a phone call one night. "The job is yours. You've got 12 hours
to fly to
Australia, to make your mind up and say yes." And that was that changed our life, that decision.
So you flew back here.
Yeah.
And you went and worked at the Australian Fine China in
Australian Fine China. Yeah.
Okay. And that was in the 70s now?
That would be 81.
81.
Yeah.
How long did you work there?
7 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I actually worked for the Federated Brick Tile and Pottery Industrial Union of Australia.
Yeah.
It was my first job in Perth.
Yeah.
I was doing all the admin work for them. But obviously by then you weren't there. So I worked with the union secretary to get everyone from Australian Fine China was a member, which was beautiful.
Yeah.
And both Bristol Clay Tiles as well. We joined them.
Yes, it was interesting. I mean, I made some enemies there.
Of course.
Because one of the things I tend to see things, well, you know this yourself and knowing me for many years, I tend to see things in black and white.
No shades of grey.
No shades.
No
of
50
grey.
shades of grey.
No 50 shades of grey. It's either right or it's wrong, and there's nothing in between.
Well, when you put it in the fire, it either lasts or it cracks.
You know, so I mean, then, you know, Australian Fine China had been going since the 1920s, so it's been going 50 odd years.
Yeah.
Never made a profit in all those 50 odd years.
Okay.
And what they tended to do was, they bought originally from the 20s, they bought somebody over from Stoke originally, right? But then every other manager was just local.
Sure.
And because what happens when you're teaching someone,
Yeah.
the knowledge in the end
dissipates.
You know.
Yeah.
And so I was the first guy. I was the last choice. You know, we either get this guy over and we make it work, or we close the doors.
So they were making the money out of bricks.
Yeah. Oh yes.
And
tiles especially.
So they were supporting this.
Yes. So when I came along, I made a lot of profit for the company. Within 4 years, we were making over $1 million a year profit.
Wow! So you turned it around.
Turned it around. But however, I had to say to them, you know, you do it my way.
Yeah.
You know, we've always done it this way. I said, no, that way is wrong. You do it my way.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you can make
a lot of enemies,
especially in higher management.
Yeah.
Who've been in charge of the company for many years and made no money.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, they start making money, and people can get a little bit jealous.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed every minute of it.
Okay.
Every minute.
So what did you do after Australian Fine China?
I went through a very hard time because my knowledge was so limited. You know, all my knowledge, all my work.
Yeah, it was all channeled in that.
And of course, there was no
other pottery unless you open your own.
That's right. No, and I even thought of doing that, but I didn't do it in the end. So I went through a very difficult time, but in the end, I became a courier, just driving a van,
courier.
And at least that put money on the table.
Yeah.
And
got you going.
Got me going again. Yeah.
Yeah. When did Christ come back on the radar for you?
Oh, that was in England, right? Yes.
Oh, before you came here.
Yeah. It would be when I met Carol. When I asked Carol to marry me, and she said, "I will marry you as long as you go to church." Right.
Okay.
That was the
condition.
That was the condition, which wasn't a very sensible condition, because I could have said yes, and then not gone.
Or at least go, but not become a Christian.
Right. But I went and I started going to church, and I got involved in little meetings, and I was having not counselling sessions, but teaching sessions with the assistant curate, or the curate of the church. Mm-hmm. And we were in there one day, you know, just talking about things, and he just said to me, you know, it says in the Bible, Geoff, gentle Jesus, you know, the Lamb of God.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you, the Lamb of God? And I just said, oh, well, you know, he's meek and mild, and, you know, he wouldn't say boo to a fly. And he said, no, he said, it means he died for your sin. He sacrificed himself for your sin. And the moment he said that, it was as if my mind was like a Rubik cube, and it went...
clicked into place.
You know, and I gave my life instantly to Christ.
Beautiful.
And I always remember I had the actual vicar, when he didn't believe that I'd given my life to Christ, the curate must have told him, you know, Geoff Parsons has given his life to Christ.
And this is a Methodist church?
No, Church of England.
Church of England.
Very, you know, very different, you know. I found it very difficult because they used to, everything was based on the prayer book, you know, and it would jump from page 20 to page 200. So all Carol did all through the service was keep finding me the right page. So I found it very hard. But anyway, the pastor came up, or the vicar came up that night and said, I believe, Geoff, you've given your life to Christ. I said, yes, I have. He said, do you believe Jesus died for you? And to this day, and this is going back, you know, 40 odd years, I can remember my answer. And I said to him, Colin, no, Jesus didn't give his life to me. He gave his life to me and no one else. Yeah. In other words, Jesus didn't die for anyone. He just died for me. Yeah. So it was very personal. Very, very personal. Very personal. And that changed my life. Yeah. Changed my life.
So do they baptize in the Church of England?
Yeah.
By immersion or sprinkle?
It must have been a sprinkle, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
I can't actually remember.
Have you had an immersion eventually?
I don't think so. I might have done, but I can't remember. But I don't
I've got a pool.
Yeah.
We can sort that out.
Yeah. I must have done, but I can't. But it really did change. But, and then I actually began, that's where my preaching began, because he said one Sunday, we're going to an old people's home.
Yes.
To do a little bit of a service, and I would like you to
share,
to just give a word. So that was the very, very first time I took that step of faith.
Nice.
Yeah.
So back in Australia then,
yeah.
Did you, as you came back here and started working, did you go into any church?
Yeah, we started going to Churchlands, which of course was a very big church in those days.
So that's where you started when you first came here, Churchlands?
Well, no, we actually started off in the Uniting Church in Scarborough.
Okay.
But then, of course, Churchlands was nothing.
Yeah.
Churchlands was just growing.
Out of Uniting Church as well.
Yeah, and growing very quickly, and a lot of the young ones were disappearing and going to this church. So in the end, we decided to follow.
Okay.
And that was, and we went there for many years, and all of a sudden, Pastor John McElroy just called me in the office one day and said, this is when I was still a courier, would you like to come on the staff?
Yeah.
And so I said, completely out of the blue, I had no desire whatsoever.
Yes.
I decided to say yes, but it was...
This was before my era, right?
Oh, yes.
Long before.
Definitely.
And how long were you there? Were you full-time or part-time?
Full-time, yeah. Full-time. I must have been there, 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
But I found it...
In the 90s?
Yes, I found it difficult.
Difficult in the sense of the speed of the church, the supernatural, the uncertainty, or...
It's just that I had no idea what a church should be.
Yeah.
And I had this idea, I suppose, that everybody in the church was like me.
Sure.
Yeah, everybody. So every Christian was like me.
Just loving the Lord, loving people, and there's no issues.
On the staff there, because it was a big staff, I discovered that wasn't true.
Yeah.
That wasn't true. And it was a big shock to me to find out that.
Yeah.
But then there was...
But you lasted 5-6 years.
There was tensions, and people would talk about you behind your back to a certain extent. But that's just normal. I aren't.
Well, it was probably more like a business place.
That's right.
Like it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think some churches do end up like that because of the admin scenario and everything that goes on. It's more about the organization and everything rather than the...
And it was run like a business. And I'm not criticizing that, because as the church gets bigger and bigger, it's... I suppose that's an eventuality that's almost certainly to happen, I think.
Yeah. Well, eventually, I worked at Churchlands as well for 3 years as the executive pastor, and you were doing voluntary work with Carol as well during that time. So, and we had challenges as well. A lot of complexities, and you were part of those meetings as well, so But you've come a long way. Did you have any children with Carol?
No.
Okay.
No. But of course, out of Churchlands, eventually we planted our own vineyard church for 12 years.
Okay, so you partnered with John Mack to plant a... No. It was a different...
John Mack then left.
He left
John McElroy left the vineyard.
Oh,
and
this is in the mid-90s?
So, and he said, are you going to come with us? And I said, no, I'm staying vineyard.
Okay, so you planted a vineyard church in Scarborough?
No, in the northern suburbs originally. The first of it was in our house originally. Yeah. In our house.
Okay.
And so
this is a Wimber.
Yeah, Wimber thing. Yeah.
Okay. So Churchlands was with Wimber for a while, and then they segued.
They went their own way.
Okay. What year was that? Late 90s.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that we grew, and I suppose we started with maybe 12 people, and we grew, I think, to over 100 at one stage.
Yeah.
But we could never... But the problem was we were both working full-time, and we were both doing ministry. The church, and that was difficult.
Of course, it would have been. So the church didn't have enough finances to release
we could... It's when you get... Every church is the same, even today. You get to that point, I think it's about 120 to 150, where you either break through that,
or you just go backwards.
And we could never quite
get over the hump.
No. We used to have a good youth. But the problem was we didn't have the money to employ a youth pastor.
Yeah.
So eventually the youth tended to wander off. But it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And it was during that time when we had our own church that we started going to Africa, which changed my life basically.
What took you to Africa the first time?
Well, one of the members of the church was an African student at university.
Yeah.
And he was a very nice guy. And one day after the service, he said, "Can I speak to you, Pastor?"
Yeah.
So we invited him back for lunch.
Yes.
And he started saying his church in Kenya, they were having a conference. Right? And they wanted to, they want to know if you would
come,
if you would speak at the conference.
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, that'd be interesting, And then I said, "Well, when's the conference?"
Yeah.
He said, "In 2 weeks' time." So I had 2 weeks.
Better than 12 hours.
Yeah, 2 weeks to make my mind up.
And fly there.
So 2 weeks later, I was on the plane
to Nairobi,
going to Africa, having no idea whatsoever.
On your own or with Carol?
With Carol. She always went. Well, she only, I think one time she didn't go with me. But we had no idea what we were letting ourselves into, and it changed my life. Even over my preaching, changed my life.
Yeah.
Because the first night, this church was right on the edge of the Rift Valley.
Yes.
No electricity.
Yeah.
And they had a generator. And so inside the church, they had just one little light.
Yeah.
As people walked in, and as it got.
You couldn't read your notes.
No, I got my notes. They had this big build-up, this mighty man of God from Australia is going to, and I looked at my notes. I couldn't read one word of my notes, and all of a sudden,
beautiful. You had to speak in the Spirit.
I had to speak in the Spirit, yes, and I found it very, very hard, but I got through it.
There was breakthrough.
Yeah, but it was a breakthrough. Yeah.
And obviously those services go on for hours and
hours. And hours. But I think God put me in that situation and said, you can't be
deep
chained.
end. You had
You can't be chained to the pulpit.
Yeah.
I still use notes now.
Of course.
But I'm not afraid to. I preach completely differently in Africa.
Yes.
Over the time than I do here. I'm a real dynamite when I speak in Africa. I run around the church and grab people by the throat and all sorts of things.
I need to have you do that in our church once.
Yeah.
I'll give you the freedom to.
I did it in the church I go to now just once.
Yeah.
And
an African sermon, no notes.
No, it was only just a short. I just left my notes aside and just said I'm going to preach now for a couple of minutes as I preach in Africa.
Yeah.
And they were quite shocked. But see, in Africa, a sermon isn't a sermon. It's got to be entertainment.
Yeah, it's got to be story.
It's got to grab them.
Otherwise, they're going to fall asleep.
That's right.
They're tired. They've been worshiping for 2 hours, 3 hours, and now they're sitting down. You can't.
Yeah, and a lot of them, would walk for 2 or 3 hours, even to get to church.
Yeah.
So going to church was a big event.
Yeah.
Big event.
Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah.
And they expected something in return.
Yeah, proper food.
Yeah.
Both spiritual and physical.
And physical food, yes.
Yeah, afterwards.
Yeah.
Nice.
So,
and you went to Africa many times after that, almost on a yearly
12,
basis?
13, 14 times.
Different places?
12 times, yeah.
Different places?
Yes. Different places. We started off in Kenya for the first few years. Then we went to Tanzania, Uganda, even more countries, about 6 different countries.
Yeah.
But, and my preaching improved as you got used to preaching African. You got used to that.
And obviously your ministry was enriched and your life was enriched with the relationships you were building, the leaders you were meeting, the families you were staying with.
Yes.
Wasn't always hotels, was it?
No,
at times?
we once stopped in a brothel.
Oh.
Me and Carol.
Well, the things you have to do when you're in a ministry.
When you suffer for Jesus.
Yeah.
And I used to come home and inspect myself, and we used to take tablets to kill any
possible
things you invented.
Inherited.
Sometimes I would shower after I came back from Africa, and I would find, leeches on the side of my leg, and oh dear, it was not easy. No. But why it changed my life was, I met the power of Christ in Australia.
Yes.
But I met the power of Satan in Africa. And that was the change.
Yeah.
To realize that the power of Satan, the power of darkness was real.
And strong and powerful and destroying lives.
And you had to stand against it.
And it was life and death.
Yes, that's right. Some of the things that happened to me were just, oh dear.
But something that stands with you.
One day when we were preaching, we crossed over the Zambezi River, and we were preaching on the border of another country where witchcraft was very strong, very strong. And so we got to this place where we were staying, and I was going to preach the next night.
Yes.
And all through the night, the drums were beating all through the night.
Yeah.
And so we said to the African guy the next morning, what are all these drums? What are all these drums for? They said, they know you are here. The witch doctors know you are here. They know you're going to preach tonight, and they are summoning the demons to come against you. And so we went, and when it went dark, no lights whatsoever. All I could see were these white teeth everywhere.
Yeah.
So I had no idea whether there was 20 there or 20,000.
Yes.
But I preached, and everything went well until the moment I said, if you want to give your life to Christ, come forward now.
Yeah.
And that moment, all the equipment behind us burst into flames.
Yeah.
Big explosion, all burst into flames.
Yeah. Did they recognize that this was spiritual?
I did. Yes, they did, yes.
Yeah. Because they'd be very in tune with the spiritual world, with the dark forces, because they coexisted with them for so long.
Yes.
So for them, a touch of the spirit is so real. That's why they manifest in a higher degree, because they know the darkness that they're saved from.
That's right.
A lot of people in the West don't realize where they're saved from.
They're very spiritual.
They learn what they're saved onto, but they don't realize the depth and the ugliness of the dark world.
But the point is, like you've just said, you cannot realize what you're saved into until you realize what you're saved out of.
Sure.
And that's what Christians in Australia don't really grasp. They know what they're saved into, but they don't really know what they're saved out of.
Yeah.
And once you know that,
the
second part becomes
true,
more real.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very, we've had things where one afternoon, because we used to speak in the morning, then I'd have a break and then speak in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And during the break, these Africans came into my room and said, we've just had a call from a village about 15 miles away. They want you to come out and exercise some demonic power. So we went out there, and because they were just talking in Swahili.
Yes.
And I said, well, what's going on? Oh, inside this hut, there's a demonic, well, they said a demonic tortoise, right? A demonic tortoise. And nobody would touch it, all right?
Yeah.
And so I said, I'll go in and get it then. And so I went in, and I couldn't find a tortoise anywhere. But what there was a dead rat.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, when a rat dies, it falls over.
Yeah.
But this rat was dead, but it was standing on its four legs. And this was the demonic. It was just a mistranslation.
Yeah.
And so I bought it out, and I said, well, what's the problem? This tortoise, it speaks to us every night.
Yeah.
It speaks to us and tells us, we're going to die and we are horrible. I said, well, why don't you throw it away? Oh, Pastor, we've done that. We've taken it away and thrown it away. Next night, it came back into the hut again. And so I said, God, there's only one way. So I put the demonic tortoise back in the hut, and they had all sorts of things there to call witchcraft.
Sure.
And we set fire to the hut.
Yeah.
And burnt it.
Yeah.
But just things like that.
Yeah. Tricky. You can't forget those things.
No, they haven't,
Yeah.
And it's the young guy that asked us to go, Carol, my wife will remember this, he might, maybe 2021, he had asked these demonic beings to come.
Yes.
And the hut this animal was in, they used to build a hut in the village, one hut, and that was for the demons to live in. Right? Nobody lived there. That was for the demons to live in there.
Wow.
And he said to me, he says, I call these demons in, and now they're attacking me. And I said, well, how are they attacking you? He said, every night they come and torture me. They come and torture me.
Yeah.
I said, how? He says, they put splints inside my fingernails.
Yes.
And I said, show me your hands. He showed me his hands, and every finger was like that, just swollen up with pus, where these demons had been torturing him. Yes.
Yeah.
So, it becomes so real that it's just incredible.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing story. It's almost unbelievable
It is,
for some people.
yeah.
You know.
And you can't tell people, because if you tell people in Australia that, 95% of Christians would say, oh, he's just making it up. No.
Because they haven't been in the trenches.
Oh, they haven't been out.
Yeah. That's why I say to people, every Christian should go into cross-cultural missions at least once in their lifetime.
Yeah.
Because their perspective will change and they will support missions, they will pray for missions, and they will change their life. It will change their life. It will be a radical change.
No, we've had.
Just before we wrap things up, Pastor Geoff, what's the legacy you're building? What would you like people to remember you by?
Well, there's no doubt about it that we've left a legacy in Africa that can never ever be eliminated.
Wiped out.
Because even now we still get emails and people ringing us up.
Yeah.
And so we made an incredible impression there through the power of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And so that, I think that is I could spend 6 months of the year there.
Yes.
And every year we went, of course, so we had to pay for ourselves.
Of course.
And we worked it out a few years ago that over that 13, 14 years, it had cost us about $120,000.
Yeah, and that's what I admire about people like yourself and Carol, because you didn't just invest your life, your energy, you also invested your money in this.
Right. Because every time we had to pay our own fares.
Of course.
There
and a lot of the times accommodation, and a lot of
and
times
accommodation,
transport.
but
Pay for others as well.
On more than one occasion, you'd get there and you'd say, well, Pastor, we haven't got enough money for the conference.
For the conference,
so
food.
Food and that, because they have to provide food for everybody. So we'd end up giving them another $600 to do that.
Yeah.
And so, but we love the African people. Absolutely love the African.
Sure.
Of course, and we had an African church here.
Yeah.
For 2 years, and that was interesting. Because you can take, one thing we learned there, you can take the person out of Africa, but you can't take Africa out of the person.
That's right. Yeah. No, and the fact that you've been there, you understand them, you get them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just like little things that sometimes you think here that, you've been ministering for so long.
Yeah.
And you think, well, what
for?
What are the results? And you think, but then all of a sudden, God just does something, where we've gone out. I remember at Churchlands we used to have what you call lads and dads, which I started. Well,
camp.
We take lads. So I used to take Adam, who was a son of a single mum, and I took him on this lads and dads camp every year for about 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Just forgotten all about him. One day, maybe a year, 2 years ago, we were sitting in a restaurant. This sports car drives up, and out of the sports car gets this Superman, Tarzan, and he had a very attractive young lady draped on his arm. I must admit, I confess now, I did look at this young lady slightly more than I should have done.
We won't tell Carol.
No, we won't tell Carol. And the young guy looked at me, and I thought to myself, oh, I could be in trouble here. Anyway, we were outside, and he went inside, and I looked at him inside, and he was still looking at me.
Yeah.
Oh no! And all of a sudden, he gets up, right?
Comes your way.
Walks out, and comes right by me at this table. He says, "You are Pastor Geoff, aren't you?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You don't recognise me." He said, "I'm Adam." And he said, "I just want you to know, you changed my life.
Yeah.
You changed my life." The time when I needed a father figure, he says, "You became that father figure. You changed my life." And it's when things like that happen, you realise you do things and they have an effect. You might not always know.
Changing one life, but changing one life matters.
He said, "You changed my life. I want to thank you."
It's interesting because obviously you're a man who had suffered.
Yeah.
Growing up without a mum.
Yeah.
Then growing up, going through divorce as well.
Yeah.
and you were still able to give their father help and blessing to other people who were not your children, but they were your spiritual children.
He learned how to live as a man. I remember the first time I took him into this, we were camping, and I was cooking the meal the first night. We were cooking hot dogs, and unfortunately, as I gave him his, the sausage fell out of the bun and fell onto the ground. So I picked it up and wiped
2 second rule.
I said, "I'm not eating that." I said, "Well, you either eat that or you go
hungry."
You go hungry. So, but he learned how to live as a man. And every time I took him home after a week, all his clothes were filthy and wet, and his mother had died of heart attack, but he enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah, he had to break into manhood.
That's right.
It was his bar mitzvah.
That's right.
Passage to manhood.
So that's happened more than once to us.
Beautiful.
Where just someone recognizes you and said, "You had an effect on my life."
You know what I love about this? Even though you've preached to the masses, you see the importance of changing one life. Changing one life. Yeah. And I think the more mature you become in ministry, the more you realize the power of one. We all love the power of many. But it's in that power of one that life is transformed.
Yes. Well, if you're going to change Australia, you change it one person
at a time. Yeah.
One person at a time.
Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Well, friends, what an amazing testimony, what a beautiful story of just resilience and perseverance. And even now, he sees more and more how important it is to change one life at a time. I'm sure you've got many people in your life that are waiting to be transformed. They are waiting for a change. They are waiting for you to invest in them, to be a spiritual mother or a spiritual father to them. We'd all love to change the masses, but changing one life is just as important. So I pray that this encourages you to look at somebody who's ready and help them and set them on the right path. Maybe take them out for a camp or something, help them through the passage to manhood, whatever it is. Look for one person that you can change. And by changing one person, you can change this world.
Amen.
So thank you so much, Pastor Geoff. Thank you so much for joining us. If you love this content, please share it. Tell others about it as well. Rate it. Subscribe to the channel where you're watching this or you're listening to this. And write a review as well for us, so we can know that this is having a wonderful challenge on you, and also it encourages you to walk of faith. We can't wait to see you next time at Kingdom Stories from Down Under. I am Natanael, Costea.
Thank you for joining us on Kingdom Stories from Down Under. We'd love it if you would subscribe, rate, and share these stories with your wider community. And remember, every story is worth sharing, including yours.